Picture this: you're at a party, drink in hand, and someone asks the inevitable question, "So, what do you do?" Almost without hesitation, you respond with your job title: "I'm a teacher, I'm a software engineer, I'm in marketing." We treat these labels as shorthand for who we are, as if a role in the economy could capture the full richness of a human life. But here's the quiet tragedy: many people spend their entire lives trying to find themselves in their careers, only to wake up one day and realize that the title they clung to was never them in the first place. This is not just a modern psychological quirk, it's a deeply ingrained cultural script. We are told from childhood to follow our passion, choose a career path, and make something of ourselves. The underlying assumption is that if you pick the right career and pour yourself into it, your true self will emerge on the other side like a reward. Yet philosophers across time have warned us against this illusion. Aristotle, writing over 2,000 years ago, argued that human flourishing, Eudaimonia, could never be reduced to external roles. Centuries later, Alan Watts, a British philosopher who popularized Eastern thought in the West, warned against the career trap that leaves people endlessly deferring life for a future that never arrives. This video brings Aristotle and Watts into dialogue to show why you'll never find yourself in a career. The modern obsession with jobs as identities has left people burnt out, confused, and detached from what actually matters. Aristotle offers a classical framework, distinguishing between means and ends, reminding us that work serves life, not the other way around. Watts, on the other hand, pulls the rug from under the very idea that identity can be found at all. Together, they help us see that the search for self in a career is doomed, but also unnecessary, because the self is not something to be located in a title, but something lived in the present. 1. The modern myth of the career as identity. In modern society, careers have become more than just a way to earn a living. They've become the primary lens through which we define who we are. From early childhood, the question, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" doesn't mean what kind of person do you want to become, but which job title will you carry? We internalize the idea that our worth is tied to our career choice, and this narrative seeps into our language. It's why people say, "I am a doctor" instead of "I practice medicine." The career doesn't just describe what you do, it colonizes your very sense of self. This myth is powerful because it promises certainty. In a world filled with uncertainty about who we are and what we're supposed to be doing, a career offers a neat label: lawyer, nurse, architect, programmer. The label makes you legible to others, easy to categorize. But this neatness comes at a cost. If your career is your identity, then losing a job or changing paths doesn't just shake your professional life, it rattles your sense of self. The stakes become existential. Burnout, depression, and the quarter-life or midlife crises so common today are not just about stress at work, they're about the collapse of an identity that was never built to hold the whole of a human life. Worse still, the myth keeps us chasing. If we don't feel fulfilled in our current job, we assume the problem is that we're in the wrong field, that if we just switched careers, we'd find ourselves. But chasing identity through career hopping only deepens the trap. The truth is simpler and harder: no career can bear the weight of being the home of your soul. Careers are shifting roles within a shifting economy, not permanent foundations for identity. This is the first crack in the myth, the recognition that you're too big to fit into a job description. 2. Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia. Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BCE, approached the question of human life with a clarity that still cuts through our modern confusion. For him, the ultimate goal of life was not success, money, or prestige but eudaimonia, a word often translated as flourishing or living well. Eudaimonia was about becoming the fullest version of yourself, realizing your potential as a rational and social being, and living in accordance with virtue. Crucially, it was not reducible to external achievements. A person could be wealthy and powerful yet fail to flourish if they lived without virtue or inner balance. When Aristotle distinguished between means and ends, he gave us a tool to cut through the illusion of careers as identity. A career is a means or a way of sustaining life, contributing to society, and perhaps exercising some talents. But it is not an end in itself. If someone treats their career as the ultimate end, they confuse the tool with the purpose. For Aristotle, the end is always eudaimonia, a state that encompasses not just work but friendship, community, leisure, and contemplation. Work is only one strand in the larger fabric of human flourishing. This perspective dismantles the modern obsession with finding yourself through a career. Aristotle would argue that yourself is not hidden inside a profession waiting to be unlocked. Rather, yourself unfolds through the practice of virtues, courage, wisdom, generosity, justice, across all areas of life. A doctor who heals but treats others with arrogance may excel at their job but fail at flourishing. A teacher who earns little but cultivates patience and nurtures community may live closer to eudaimonia. Aristotle's lesson is timeless: careers are too narrow to contain the fullness of the human good. 3. Alan Watts on the career trap. Fast forward 2 millennia, and Alan Watts, a mid-20th century philosopher and popularizer of Eastern wisdom, delivers a blunt critique of the very same trap Aristotle warned against. Watts observed how people in industrialized societies were conditioned to treat life as a series of deferred gratifications. You go to school, not to learn for its own sake, but to get into the next school, which leads to the next, and eventually to a job. The job then becomes about climbing the ladder, earning the next promotion, saving for retirement. Life itself gets postponed in the name of making something of yourself. For Watts, this was not only a cultural mistake but a spiritual tragedy. He argued that careers trick people into mistaking roles for reality. We put on masks, banker, lawyer, professor, and start believing the mask is our face. But when you ask someone, "Who are you?" and they answer with a career, you're not really getting an answer to the question, you're getting an economic category. Watts called this out as a shallow way of existing. The self is not a role. The self is the present, living, breathing awareness experiencing this moment. To bury that awareness under a job title is to trade life for a label. Watts pushed for a radical reorientation: stop living life as a deferred project, and stop treating careers as the center of identity. He often used the metaphor of music and dance. Nobody plays music just to get to the end of the song, and nobody dances just to reach the final step. We do these things for the joy of doing them. Likewise, life should not be lived only for the sake of a future career identity. It should be lived now, as play, as expression. To find yourself in a career, Watts would say, is to miss the point. You were already here all along. 4. Why careers fail as vehicles of selfhood. The first and most obvious reason careers fail as vehicles for selfhood is their instability. The modern economy is in constant flux, with industries rising and collapsing in a matter of decades. A coal miner in the 20th century may have believed his role was stable for life, only to watch automation and policy shifts erase entire job categories. Today, tech workers find themselves facing similar precarity as companies downsize or pivot with the tides of innovation. If your very self is tied to a career, what happens when that career disappears? A person who has anchored their identity in their job will feel not only unemployed but existentially unmoored. Beyond instability, there is also the reductionism of careers as identity. A career describes what you do in the marketplace, not the totality of your being. A poet who works as a cashier is no less a poet because their paycheck comes from scanning groceries. A father or mother who spends their days raising children may not hold a formal career at all, yet their lives may be rich with purpose. When society treats career as the primary measure of who someone is, it blinds us to the broader ways people create meaning. Aristotle's framework reminds us that flourishing is not reducible to labor roles, while Watts warns that role-playing is a kind of mask that hides the deeper self. Finally, careers fail as vehicles of selfhood because they are external constructs. They are shaped by economies, governments, and corporations, not by the essence of who you are. A career is something you step into, a role pre-designed by systems larger than yourself. Identity, on the other hand, arises from the inside out. The two may intersect, but they are never the same. Confusing them leads to fragility. When the role shifts, your sense of self shatters. To avoid this collapse, both Aristotle and Watts urge us to distinguish the temporary from the eternal, the mask from the face. 5. Work versus vocation versus play. If careers fail as selfhood, what's the alternative? Aristotle and Watts point us toward a healthier framework, distinguishing between work, vocation, and play. Work is what we do to sustain ourselves, feeding, clothing, sheltering. It is necessary, but it is not ultimate. Aristotle saw work as part of this means category, never the end. To mistake work for the end is to misunderstand the hierarchy of human goods. For him, leisure, not idleness, but contemplative activity, was the highest form of life because it allowed space for reflection, friendship, and the pursuit of wisdom. Vocation, by contrast, speaks to a sense of calling. Unlike a career, which is externally defined, vocation is internal. It's about aligning your actions with your deeper values. A person may have a career as a doctor, but their vocation might be to heal. One may work as a carpenter, but their vocation is to create. Vocation connects work to the inner life without reducing identity to a job title. It is here that Aristotle's virtues and Watts' insistence on authentic living converge. Vocation is a way of expressing the self without being imprisoned by a role. Then comes play, which Watts elevates to a central metaphor for life. Play is not frivolous, it is the natural way humans explore and create without the pressure of outcome. A child playing is not trying to achieve something, they are absorbed in the moment. Watts argued that adults should approach life with the same spirit, not as a linear march toward some career-based self, but as an unfolding dance. When work becomes infused with play, it loses its grip as identity and instead becomes expression. For Aristotle, this resembles the flourishing life, where activities are done for their own sake, not merely as stepping stones. Together, they show that meaning emerges not from career labels, but from the interplay of work, vocation, and play. 6. Counter-arguments. Of course, many would push back, don't careers give people meaning, structure, and community? For countless individuals, careers are not just economic necessities but sources of pride and belonging. The doctor who saves lives, the teacher who shapes minds, the engineer who builds bridges, these roles are often deeply tied to personal fulfillment. It would be unfair to dismiss this entirely. Careers can provide a sense of contribution, identity, and continuity that feels very real. Yet, the problem arises when careers are mistaken for the entirety of identity. A teacher who retires may feel adrift if their whole self was tied to their role in the classroom. A professional athlete who hangs up their uniform may feel like they've lost themselves. The meaning and structure provided by careers are conditional. They last only as long as the role lasts. When life circumstances change, the illusion of career as self is exposed. Watts, in particular, warned that identifying too closely with any role is like clinging to a mask. It might fit for a while, but sooner or later, the mask has to come off. Even the argument from contribution, while compelling, cannot resolve this. Yes, careers allow us to contribute to society. But contribution is not the same as identity. You can contribute as a worker, a neighbor, a parent, a volunteer, or even as a presence of kindness in your community. Aristotle's framework helps us see that the good life is not exhausted by one mode of contribution. If careers provide a piece of meaning, fine, but they are never the whole picture. To conflate them with the self is to build your house on shifting sand. 7. A healthier relationship to work. If careers cannot be the foundation of identity, then what would a healthier relationship to work look like? Aristotle gives us one starting point. For him, work was not inherently bad, but it was never meant to dominate the human soul. It had to be put in its place, as one activity among many, subordinate to the higher aim of eudaimonia. In practice, this meant valuing work not for its title or prestige but for how it contributes to a balanced life. A healthier relationship to work, then, begins with remembering that jobs are instruments, not identities. They help us survive, sometimes they allow us to serve, but they are not ends in themselves. Alan Watts adds another crucial insight: work should be aligned with play. His famous advice was to find what you love and figure out how to let that sustain you, not in the sense of chasing passion as a career, but in refusing to live life as a grind. He warned against the trap of doing work only for the sake of the next step. A healthier approach is to treat work as an extension of life, not its suspension. In this framing, even mundane jobs can be infused with presence and playfulness. You are not your job, but the way you approach your work can either suffocate or enrich your existence. Practically, this reorientation frees people from the crushing pressure to find themselves in a job title. Instead, identity is located in how you live, not what you do for a living. Work becomes a platform for expression rather than a prison of self-definition. The teacher who sees teaching not as their essence but as one way to embody patience and care is free. The engineer who sees building as play rather than identity is free. Aristotle would call this living in accordance with virtue, while Watts would call it rediscovering the dance of life. Together, they sketch the contours of a healthier relationship to work, one that supports, but never consumes, the self. 8. The danger of misidentifying self with role. The danger of equating selfhood with a career is not merely theoretical, it has tangible, often devastating consequences. Burnout is one of them. When people over-identify with their jobs, every setback becomes personal, every failure a blow to the core of who they believe themselves to be. This creates unsustainable pressure, as though one's worth is on the line every time a deadline looms or a project falters. The epidemic of burnout in modern societies is not just about long hours, it's about people collapsing under the weight of a role that was never meant to bear their entire identity. Another danger is existential emptiness at life's transitions. Retirement is the clearest example. Countless professionals, upon leaving their careers, experience profound disorientation. If someone has spent 40 years being a lawyer or as a teacher, what happens when that role vanishes? The silence that follows can be terrifying, because the mask has been removed and the underlying face feels undefined. Aristotle's reminder that identity rests in virtue, not role, and Watts' insistence that self is never reducible to a mask, both speak directly to this crisis. They urge us to build our sense of self on something more durable than job titles. Even history offers stark illustrations. In ancient Rome, senators and generals who lost their offices often fell into despair, some even choosing suicide rather than live without their public roles. In modern times, professional athletes who retire often face depression and identity loss, despite wealth and fame. The pattern is clear. Tying identity to a career sets up an inevitable collapse when that career ends. Both Aristotle and Watts challenge us to see beyond the fragility of role. The danger is not that careers give us structure, it's that they tempt us into mistaking the structure for the substance of life. 9. Living beyond titles. What, then, does it mean to live beyond titles? For Aristotle, it means aiming at eudaimonia, a flourishing life rooted in virtue, friendship, contemplation, and balance. Careers may serve as contexts where virtues are practiced, but they are not the essence of who you are. A person lives beyond titles when they see themselves first as a human being striving toward goodness, rather than as a professional role filling a slot in the economy. Titles come and go, the pursuit of virtue endures. For Watts, living beyond titles means recovering the sense of life as play. He urged people to loosen their grip on rigid identities and see themselves as part of a cosmic dance. You are not fundamentally a lawyer, a teacher, or an engineer, you are an expression of life itself, temporarily inhabiting a role. When you stop clinging to the mask, you can enjoy the role without mistaking it for your true face. Watts' call was not to reject work altogether, but to stop making it the axis of identity. To live beyond titles is to laugh at them, to wear them lightly, and to remember that the dance matters more than the label. This shift has profound practical implications. Imagine if, at that party where someone asks, "What do?" you responded not with a career title but with a description of what you love, what you value, or how you live. Instead of "I'm a doctor," perhaps, "I work to help people heal." Instead of "I'm a programmer," perhaps, "I love solving puzzles and building things." These reframings move identity away from rigid titles and toward the deeper expressions of self. Both Aristotle and Watts invite us to practice this reframing daily, remembering that titles are temporary masks, while the self is a living, breathing mystery too vast to fit on a resume. 10. Conclusion. We began with a simple but pressing observation. People today often confuse their careers with their identities. When asked who they are, they respond with what they do. This conflation, while culturally common, is philosophically unsound and personally dangerous. Careers, as we've seen, are shifting roles within a shifting economy. They can support us, give us opportunities for expression, and provide a sense of contribution, but they can never define who we are. The attempt to find yourself in a career is like trying to bottle the ocean in a jar. The self is far larger, more dynamic, and more mysterious than any job description. Aristotle's framework helps us see why. Human flourishing, eudaimonia, is the ultimate end. Careers are means, tools, contexts, channels. They can contribute to flourishing, but they are never the goal itself. To treat them as such is to misplace the hierarchy of human goods. It is to confuse instrument with purpose. Aristotle's reminder is that virtue, friendship, contemplation, and balance matter more than titles. The flourishing life cannot be reduced to an occupation because it stretches across all aspects of existence. Alan Watts sharpens this lesson for modern ears. He warns us of the career trap, the endless deferral of living in pursuit of an identity that never quite arrives. For Watts, selfhood is not hidden inside a profession, it is always here, in the present, in the playful awareness of being alive. The danger is not that we work, but that we forget we are more than our work. Careers become masks we wear, and when we mistake the mask for the face, we suffer. To live freely, Watts insists, is to treat life as play, to wear titles lightly, and to refuse to reduce the self to a role. Final reflections. So, why will you never find yourself in a career? Because the self is not an object hidden in the world waiting to be discovered. It is not a destination at the end of a corporate ladder. It is not a certificate, a resume, or a paycheck. The self is the lived experience of being, a movement, a process, a dance. Careers may play a part in that dance, but they are steps, not the music itself. To search for yourself in a career is to mistake the echo for the song. What both Aristotle and Watts offer us is liberation. Aristotle liberates us from the illusion that external roles are ends in themselves. He grounds us in the pursuit of eudaimonia, a life of virtue, friendship, and balance. Watts liberates us from the trap of deferral and mask-wearing, reminding us that selfhood is here, now, in the simple act of living. Together, They show us that the good life is not about nailing down a title but about living fully, authentically, and presently. For those trapped in the myth of career as identity, this message is both unsettling and hopeful. It's unsettling because it removes the illusion of certainty. A job title cannot anchor you forever. But it's hopeful because it frees you from the impossible task of finding yourself in an external label. You are already more than your career. You always were. To live this truth is to step into a life larger than any profession could ever contain. In the end, the best answer to who are you is not a title, but a life well lived.